In November of 2020, Peru made global headlines as it sought its third president in the span of 1 week. Following the impeachment and ousting of President Martin Vizcarra, mass demonstrations occurred in the capital Lima against the impeachment and newly sworn-in President Manuel Merino. After violent clashes between demonstrators and police, Merino stepped down, leaving this relatively stable nation in a state of crisis. Hi, my name is Thomas Freeman, and today I will be discussing Peru. Peru's unitary semi-presidential representative democratic republic situated in the western Andean region of South America. The country is home to an estimated 32 million people and is one of the fastest growing economies in the region. Prior to the Spanish conquest, Peru hosted the most robust and advanced empire in the Americas, the Incan Empire. From the time of independence in 1824 until 1979, Peru was largely undemocratic, with the government being intermittently controlled by the Peruvian oligarchy and the military. Peru's final period of military control began in 1968, when Peruvian military leader Juan Velasco Alvarado overthrew a civilian government and established one of Latin America's only leftist military dictatorships. In 1979, members of the revolutionary government of the armed forces were part of the drafting of a new constitution, which initiated the process of democratization. The early 1980s saw some of Peru's first free and fair elections, but by the late 80s, the Peruvian state was in crisis, facing the rise of the Maoist Shining Path movement and growing economic turmoil resulting from the adoption of heterodox economic policies such as ISI in the 1980s. According to Teachman, Latin America's economic crisis in the 1980s resulted in an affinity for populist candidates such as Peru's Alberto Fujimori. Kaufman notes that despite Fujimori's initial opposition to neoliberal economics, Peru's economic crisis created an environment where, quote, by the 90s, radical adjustment of some kind was difficult to avoid. Fujimori ultimately embraced neoliberal economics. His shift to the right distanced him from potential allies in Congress, which, according to McClintock, is part of the reason why Fujimori ultimately conspired with the military to overthrow Congress in an auto coup in 1992. Fujimori subsequently broadened the scope of the executive to the point where he possessed near dictatorial powers. Despite this, Fujimori won again in a landslide in 1995, primarily because of increasing levels of economic prosperity and the defeat of the Shining Path. Fujimori resigned in 2000, and Peru has been democratic since 2001. Thanks to economic reforms, Peru has seen massive social advancements since the late 20th century. According to the World Bank, GDP per capita has increased substantially, rates of poverty have declined, and life expectancy has increased. Civil-military relations have also improved in the 21st century. Peru's defense structure matches Payan Berlin's so-called ideal type, with a vertical chain of command from the president to a civilian defense ministry to the heads of each branch. Additionally, those who committed crimes against humanity and who abused military power, such as former President Alberto Fujimori, have been prosecuted by the Peruvian government, which is an important part of reconciliation. Despite these advancements, the Peruvian public is largely disenchanted with the political system. Vergara and Watambe explained that this is due in part to the absence of vertical accountability in the Peruvian political system. The source of this issue is threefold: absence of well-established political parties, a weak civil society, and economic growth since the Fujimori regime all contribute to the issue of low vertical accountability. During the 1990s, Peru experienced the demise of all well-established political parties, and since 2001, Peru's political system has been characterized by weak party institutionalization. Experts such as Mainwaring cite the adoption of runoff elections as the catalyst for this issue. On the other hand, McClintock notes that even prior to the adoption of runoff elections, Peru experienced periods of weak party institutionalization. McClintock argues that Peru's large number of political parties is the result of dissatisfaction with incumbents and ideological and ethnic cleavages in Peruvian society. The absence of a strong civil society makes vertical accountability incredibly difficult. McClintock explains that while business confederations maintain considerable power within Peruvian politics, grassroots organizations remain largely uninfluential outside of local politics. The primary source of this issue is the absence of collective rights in Peru's 1993 constitution. Finally, experts such as Vergara and Watanabe have observed a positive correlation between economic growth and low vertical accountability in Peru. Economic growth, or rather the fear of stopping the country's current economic momentum, incentivizes candidates to embrace the economic status quo after assuming power. This means that while candidates often campaign on the left, they end up governing from the right. In addition to the issue of low vertical accountability, corruption is and has been an issue that has plagued the Peruvian government for decades. In 2019, Transparency International gave Peru a score of 36 out of 100, and found that 65% of the population believed that corruption had increased in the 12 months prior. These issues help explain the current political crisis in Peru, which began during the presidency of Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. Kuczynski won the 2016 Peruvian general election, but his party, the PPK, failed to win the majority of seats in Congress. Shortly thereafter, it was revealed that the PPK had accepted bribes from Brazilian conglomerate Odebrecht. The majority party Popular Force, led by Alberto Fujimori's daughter Keiko Fujimori, called for impeachment. Before impeachment trials began, Kuczynski pardoned Alberto Fujimori, who had been convicted of crimes against humanity, in what many speculate was a backroom deal between the PPK and Popular Force to help Kuczynski avoid impeachment. Many members of the Peruvian public were outraged. In 2018, Kuczynski resigned, and his vice president Martin Vizcarra assumed the presidency. Vizcarra was relatively popular in Peru and promised an end to corruption. However, he was impeached on November 9, 2020 on charges of, quote, moral incompetence and bribery. Many members of the public believed that these claims were unsubstantiated, and outrage ensued when the leader of the opposition Popular Force Party, Manuel Merino, assumed the presidency. 5 days later, Merino resigned after mass protests and hostile encounters between the police and protesters, which left several dead. On November 16, Francisco Sagasti was sworn in as the new president following Merino's resignation. He is expected to serve until mid-April, and Congress hopes that his centrist posture will ease tension. I spoke with Francisco Sanchez, who served in the Clinton administration as the chief of staff to the special envoy to the Americas about these protests and Peru's current political crisis. Here's what he had to say.
There's been some polling done that something like 86% of the Peruvian people support the protests that have been going on, and something like 35, 36, 37% of the population is protesting. So I think what's happened, which is to me is actually very positive, is the people are having none of this.
Concerning diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Peru, Sanchez said that
we have, for quite a long time, have had a very good and positive relationship with Peru.
The U.S. is home to an estimated 679,000 Peruvian Americans, and my home state of Florida hosts roughly 19% of them, more than any other state in the nation. I spoke with Rania, who manages a local Peruvian restaurant here in Jacksonville, and asked her if the Peruvian community was concerned about the protest and Peruvian politics in general.
To be honest, I don't think that people that move from Peru to this country, we move for a reason. Sometimes we don't want to have to deal with politics. We don't have to deal, with the economy or anything. We come here to have a better life. So a lot of people, we just kind of disconnect. But older people, for example, my dad, he does that.
Thank you for watching.